Let's get going. So we have today, we're going to talk about restyles. Okay. So I want to find out really what we have today. We're going to talk that's me. I want to find out what you guys think a restyle would be, what you understand restyling to be in an LHA perspective or the EPA perspective. What we can do with a restyle. So it hasn't got to be something where you go from this length here to really short and completely change the look of the person. It can be something quite subtle with expertly explaining your layering techniques and your shaping techniques on what you're actually doing to change the shape of the person's hair. So you guys have all got EPA coming up. As far as I'm aware, you guys in Canada are all going for EPA at some point in the next couple of months. It probably should have been already. There's a girl from my group in Loughton. She's on as well. Won't give you the names for online safety reasons. But she's going to have an EPA coming up very soon as well, or in the next couple of months. So the idea that we had over in Loughton when we were talking with groups over there that I've been working with is people will be doing their, you have two models and two or three models, and you'll go through your run. So people normally start on their highlighting, that will be your T section, so changing your, or restoring depth and tone. And then people generally went on to doing their haircut or their restyle on a long model and taking that long model shorter. Now, we found over there that there was some guests coming in, or models coming in with hair that was around about here. And they were worried about taking the 3 inches off, first of all, because it's going to take them up to sort of a bob length. And then we started to think of where can we actually go with our mannequins or with our models. Sorry, I've just asked somebody to unmute there. So I'm not actually asking you to unmute. Where can we actually go with our models who have hair that's around about here, that don't want to go too much shorter? Obviously, you have to take the 3 inches, but then don't want to have layering in their hair or don't want to have too much layering in their hair. And I was looking at what we could actually do for this session today, because correct me now if I'm wrong, you guys who are on the call, most of you will have longer hair and you want to do your restyle on long hair. Is that correct? If somebody wants to come onto the thing and have a chat, or pop it in the chat bar, I've also got the chat open. I'll run off the assumption that you guys all have longer hair, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, for your restyle look. So I thought, why not do something on a mannequin that can show a different way to do your restyle and also a different way to actually explain the work through. So my biggest thing for my apprentices that I work with in Loughton, they're all so good. They can all push for distinction. And in my background, I found that where I got my marks from in my examinations is primarily the way I discussed hair and spoke about hair, but changed the shape internally with somebody's hair without going too short with our layers. So if you think of the way we layer hair at the LHA, we go for your long graduation or your square layer, which is your short or your softest and your, if you will, your lightest form of layering. So everything is lifted up quite high and all hits that 180 degree point, or if you're speaking in your terms of how the hair sits, everything just comes up to hit that roof point, okay? Now, if somebody, primarily, you'd probably say your restyles for EPA, you've cut them already. So if they've got some layers, they'll probably have those layers in there. So the next step of layering is going to be your uniform layer. Now, a uniform layer is a lot choppier and a lot shorter layering technique. So if your guest is saying they don't want to go for too much layers and you're then going to have to change your shape by doing a uniform layer, there's a bit of a difficulty involved with that, because either you don't change the shape enough to pass your EPA, or your model's going to go home quite angry. And let's be fair, they're probably going to be a friend or a family member. So what can we do that is slightly different? I'm going to run you through a few techniques today that I personally use the way I cut hair myself, If I had that same issue, I would use this technique myself. But also, I want to talk about side partings and how we work hair off the side parting, because a lot of the time hair is formulated to be in a central parting. And that seems to work quite nicely if the person always wears their hair in the center. There she goes. So what can we do that changes? And what's the difference between working with a side parting and working with a central parting? And how can we combat the way the hair sits? Okay, so if somebody is working, or if somebody wears their hair all over the place, they don't really know where their parting's going to fall, then cut that hair in the center, because obviously then we can flip the hair across. But say they only wear their hair in one parting, which most people I know tend to do, you're going to find that you're going to get one side of your layering is very, very high. So if I try and demonstrate that, you're going to find that, say this is our layering here, it's going to sit up here somewhere, and these layers are going to sit down here somewhere. So your layering almost looks off balance. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that before. And it's confusing because we've cut everything in a square layer, or everything up to the top point, or even with our uniform layer, but we still find the hair sits off kilter and off balance. If anybody has seen that has happened to them before, please do unmute yourselves and let me know. If anybody has any questions about anything during, please do unmute yourselves and let me know. If you don't want to speak in the group, you can drop something in the chat bar and I can answer that too. And also, if I'm running off an assumption here that people have longer models because that's what I generally see. But please do come on if you have somebody who's actually shorter. I would love you guys to then and ask me or speak to me about what we could do with that, because we can plan something for next week where we can go into shorter hair. Okay, so I'm primarily looking for everybody that I work with to get distinctions. The shorter you go with your restyle, I find it's easier to show your technique and easier to show what you can actually do to control and manipulate hair. Okay, so if you can go into a graduated bob, I know it's scary and that's a little bit worrying, but we will go into graduated bobs in a couple of weeks' time on videos, and they're easy if you work with a nice technique. So the shorter you go and the more you explain your work through to your examiner, perfect. Kill her with terminology. That's what I say all the time to my groups, is just explain your work through more than she can understand, and then you're going to show your technique and you're going to show what you can actually do. Okay, so let's get going. So Restyle work firstly is going to be our removal of 3 inches of hair. Okay, quite simple explanation, but we need to give our terminologies to our guest, to our examiner, and we need to ensure that she knows we're not just taking off 3 inches just to pass. We're taking the 3 inches to ensure that we understand our technique and that we show that we know what we're doing. Okay, so when we're explaining through in our consultation, or we're speaking to our guest in our consultation, make sure she hears what you're talking about, and make sure you're talking about bone structures, you're talking about the body, and you're talking about her lifestyle, because that's where we're going to go with our absolute look, and we want to make sure that it's going to suit the person. Okay, I always think work near where she's sitting. So she's going to come in and she's going to base herself in a section. So try and get yourself quite close to her, because everything that you're doing throughout the EPA is going to be assessed and it's going to be listened to. So it makes more sense in my mind, hopefully it does in your mind as well, but it makes more sense to me that people who, when you're explaining what you're doing and you're explaining your products, for instance, that you're using, and you're explaining what the shampoo that you're going to use is going to do for your guest, all of that adds marks to you. And all of that ensures that you're going to get a higher grade at the end. But if she can hear your consultation where you're speaking about the person's lifestyle, you're going to know what the person's lifestyle is. But ask questions about it and find out what the person does as their job, for instance, or find out what people do with their hair. So my biggest thing for a consultation when I'm starting my work is not asking what you're going to be doing today, because that's sort of your job. You don't really ask, you don't ask a doctor what he's going to be doing when you go for an operation. Oh, how are we starting today? You're going to want to ask what they like about the hair, what they don't like about the hair, and find out the pitfalls and the negativities that I have, so then you can correct those straight away. and it sort of gives you a much easier in with your consultation. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm going to work myself a restyle of this. So my mannequin at the moment has a long graduation or a square layer. Okay, I'm going to change that. But she said to me, if we're imagining she's a person, she said to me that she doesn't want to go too layered and she doesn't really want to go too short. So what can I do for something that's a little bit not so layered, but not so short? She's also mentioned to me that she's got quite fine hair around the front. So I need to build some weight into that front piece. And I've also got to be very careful of my section through here behind the ear, because I've assessed this mannequin and there's a massive, I don't know if anyone uses this particular block, but there's a big gap between the hairline and the actual ear area. So if I were to use my uniform layer, where I'm coming round off the base of the guest's head and I come into this point here, I'm going to find that all of this density of hair, we lose half of it, yeah? So half of it comes up and we lose half of our density straight away. So what's going to happen in here is I'm going to find a big hole creates down here because I lose the substance and the sustenance of the overall line that I've just worked on. Hopefully that makes sense. It will do in a little bit. So I need to create something and some form of layer to control that area, but still change the shape internally with my haircut, okay? So I'm not going to use a uniform layer. I'm going to use a different sort of layering. And that's what I want to go through with you guys today, because you're at a stage where you're going into level 3 pretty soon. So if we can start talking about shape work, so square, round and triangular, and start to focus a little bit more on actually what's on the head as opposed to what we're cutting off the head. Okay, so I'm going to begin with my line. Now, I'm not going to belittle you guys too much on your line. I know you guys can all put a pretty clean line into the base, but I'm going to change the way I work it slightly, and I'm going to run from my crown area as opposed to working off my radial. And the reason for that is this whole area in here, so this 1.5 inches of area into this little triangle, this whole section is quite a difficult area to control when you're working off your balance. Now, we covered this in the last lockdown where we were doing videos on one length work, but I want to primarily run through it again. It's all to control this area. So when we come into our layers, I'll explain this a little bit more. And when we come into our line work, when we come into the sides, you're going to see what I mean by just holding this section here. To keep your balance, the most important area is to run your shape in the base or in the back. And then these pieces here, beyond your 2 bones, which I'll talk about in a moment, they're your fundamental area to control your balance. And there's nothing worse than as a guest in salon saying, oh, is it longer on one side? And you've then got to go through and just chip off a little bit on the left or the right, okay? So we're going to push our head forwards and I'm going to start down the center back. So I'm going to run my section, if I just let me know here what I've done. Because we've got a side parting, I've pretty much just isolated the front 2 sections from the back. I'm going to work the back down the center and then run my side parting through as sort of 2 different haircuts, if you will, or 2 different connection points. So center point down the back. Is anyone nervous about their EPA? Has anyone got anything they want to speak about that they're a little bit worried about on the process of the day? Or anyone got anything that they don't really understand too well cutting wise that we can alleviate today or alleviate over the next couple of weeks? If anyone has anything like that, please do unmute yourself.
I do. I'm so nervous about the whole thing. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Why is that? Why when did you soon?
I don't know. It was meant to be in January, but obviously we're in lockdown, so.
Okay. What is it do you know how your run plan's going to go? And do you know how your days?
No, like, I feel like I would feel less anxious if I had like a plan, but I have no idea like what I'm meant to be doing or like how many haircuts or like, it's just really confusing to my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'll do is I'm in your group now. So, or I'm in your WhatsApp group. So last week, I ran through a draft plan of what we could potentially do for the day. I've recorded the video, so I'll send that video into the group And I'll also email you over a load of information about the EPA. I've got questions that could possibly be answered, actual run plans. I've got drafts of other people's day plans. So it could be quite good to have a look through those. It is confusing and it is very, very scary, but it's only scary if you don't have your plan set, okay? And we'll work over the next couple of weeks of getting people's plans up to date and getting people's plans covering everything that you want to cover, all right? But I will email that over to everybody.
Thank you.
My pleasure. But in terms of cutting, don't be worried about the haircuts. And honestly, the haircutting is going to be fine. And if anybody's got anyone, as I say, who's a shorter model, let's utilize this time while we're at home. I love cutting hair, so I will take you through Restyle techniques you can use, okay? So with our line work, let's get going. So with our one length, we're going to start in the back, and I'm going to run my line and take it up 3 inches. So I'd say that's about 3 inches in there. Where are we? That's about 3 inches, yeah. So I don't think she's ever going to get her... she's not going to get her tape measure out and measure what's on the floor of your mannequin. She's just going to watch you start and actually take a bit of a guidance of where your hair was when it started and where it has ended up. But you haven't got, I've never seen somebody pick up some hair with a ruler and actually check if it's 3 inches long. So just make sure you're cutting off enough, but you don't have to go overboard with it and you don't have to go too crazy. So what we'll have done here for the benefit of people who haven't done their plans or don't know their plans, you'll have probably end up starting with your T-section of highlights. So you'll restore depth and tone, and then you'll go into your haircut, which is a restyle. And then you've primarily got to go through, what would you do next? You'd blow dry the hair. So you'll blow dry the hair with a round brush, and then she'll see that. And then you'll do your heated set, and she'll come over and have a look at that. And then she'll see you do your hair up involving 3 techniques, and she'll see you doing that. And then you've got to do something on short hair. So maybe get a short hair block or a blow dry. But in the video that I'll send through to you guys in the group, it explains this in quite a lot of detail and explains how you can work your day to get something really good and a really high score. Okay. So with my line, I'm moving up now. I'm taking quite big sections because I know you guys have done a lot of one length work before. It's really the layers where we want to break it down a little bit more detail. So again, I'm going to start in the center back. And I work through my comb because with our elevation, as soon as you lift the hair off the back of the person, you're creating outline graduation. So if you see when someone walks down the road, if I do it on my top, it's easier. They've got a clean one length when their head's up, they look down and the hair sort of splits, doesn't it? And you get all of that bittiness on the bottom. That's your graduation or your outline graduation. Where that's created is if we cut our one length in our fingers and pull the hair out here, you're going to get a much more heavy form of graduation on the underneath. So personally, I like to keep my comb or my hair in the comb and work my one length through my comb, just to ensure that I don't have any graduation to take off at the very, very end. It's quite a time consuming thing, especially when you're in salon and you've got your next guest waiting for you. The last thing you want to be doing is taking more time out of your day to have to run through and take off all of the bottom graduation, okay? Ensure the balance is set. And now we come on to this area behind the ear. So generally people would tend to come up and work up to this section here from your crown, and then just work our sections horizontal into the front. But myself, I'm gonna go all the way through. So when you're explaining this to your guest, when the examiner's listening to you, we're going to say something along the lines of, we're going to work our shape, or when you're explaining it to your examiner, sorry, so you're going to keep your sections from the nape area running parallel the entire way through the haircut. And that's going to give me a much cleaner balance and a much cleaner haircut, but not distribute the weight anywhere into the haircut either. So what happens with your sectioning is when your sections are flat or slightly diagonal, and then they change to go to vertical up to this top section here, you're pushing weight in behind the ear and pushing weight into the front piece. And what that's going to do is just fundamentally give you a little bit more flick in one area and a little bit more of a weighty feel in the other area. So when you come to do your balance, it's really difficult to keep control. But also you'll find that in here, as I was talking about here, where your crown area sits, this little triangle that we mentioned beforehand naturally wants to sit here behind the ear. So where we're over directing this section of hair back into the center back, what you're finding is the length of hair actually gets short to long. So when you come into the side to try and get your balance, there's no clean line, there's no clean guideline for you to actually run off. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, please do come on and I'll explain it a little bit more. I'll try and explain it a little bit more. But you want the hair to sit where it naturally wants to go. If we're over directing hair, which we know over direction is pulling hair away from its natural fall, you're elongating that length. So the length is traveling further than it needs to go. I hope that makes sense. So if we run our shape parallel, or our section parallel through into the front piece, it keeps a much more even balance, but I'm now sure that my length is going to be balanced. Because I'm running from the center back, I'm running cleanly round into the front. Hopefully
Rob.
Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, Aisha showed me that in college actually. And I was like, that's not college. But she was kind of referring to, I think, time as well.
Yeah.
Does that help with time, doing it that way?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I find if your work is flowing and your work is clean and tidy, but your sections are coming all the way through, all the way to the front, and you know where you're working, your time's going to be so much quicker. But that's a really good point, Rohan, actually, and it's something that when you're working in timings, and especially with EPA, you have to. It's a really, really key thing to focus on your cleanliness of your work. Now, I'm very fussy with the cleanliness of my work. If I don't have a clean section in that, I can't stand it. It winds me up. But on the EPA day, you've got to do everything you can to keep yourself calm and keep yourself up to scratch, really, and stop yourself from getting confused. So yeah, definitely. It definitely helps with time, and it definitely helps with just overall hair manipulation and hair control. Nice point. So I'm running my front piece to the back, so I'm going to start to use my fingers now, because alternatively, you're using your comb, you're going to lose your tension. So it is easier to come back and just hold this in your fingers. So if we see where we're coming to, what you're going to find is, if you have a little feel on your heads, you've got the center one with center bone, which is your occipital bone. Okay. If you come and feel these two areas behind your ear, you'll also have two little bones jutting out of your head just behind your ears. If you're feeling, they are called your mastoid process bones. Okay. Don't focus too heavily on the name, because you probably won't remember it. But it's important to understand the anatomy of your body towards your head. And your mastoid process bones will, if you draw a line from your mastoid process down your body, it will hit your shoulder blades. Shoulder blades? Yeah. They are the ones in the middle, aren't they? Shoulder blades. They're your collarbones I'm thinking of, yeah. So your, I can see Aisha in the screen. So your mastoid process will come down and hit your shoulder blades in the center of your back. Okay, so that's a nice balance and an even balance when you're working from the front and over directing your section of hair back into the back. People say to me all the time, where do I pull it back to? Pull it back from your mastoid process, your sides, into your shoulder blade section. And I promise you, if your feet don't move, your balance will always be clean, because you're just pulling this side into your right shoulder blade, this side into your guest's left shoulder blade. You're creating that nice little dinky line, and it will extend through. In a couple of weeks, we're going to go through the face and what you can actually use in the face as your balance, which is a really quite an interesting little session. But if we use my mannequin here, so just for the camera, her neck is in there, so her shoulder blade is going to be around about here. So I'm going to stand in the back, and I'm just going to over direct all of my front piece into this right hand side into this right hand side shoulder blade area of my guest. Okay, because I find it difficult if I run something over to here. I used to find it difficult to find where I'm actually standing, and some people even lean themselves round and come and cut in the side. but that defeats the object of standing in the back. Does that make sense? So if you step to the right, you're going to round your shape. But primarily what we want to do is just keep our balance. And we're going to come up to bobs soon. I've got a great technique for bobs, which is just using this mastoid process area to our advantage. Just leave that out and work the hair where it naturally wants to fall. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier. Hopefully you understand that. I mean, if you don't, again, please do come on and we can speak into detail a little bit more about it. But as Rohan was saying, Aisha covered with them in Academy, it just covers your timings as well. Makes your timings easier, keeps you nice and relaxed. Your sections aren't going from diagonal to straight to horizontal. They're just staying parallel the whole way through. And it can guarantee you a nice clean service and a nice clean line, especially. Okay. So again, I'm going to spray her down to keep her hair evenly down. And we're going to do the same technique through this left-hand side. So the head is forward again. And in the back, I'm just going to work my shape through. And then I'm going to start to use my fingers to over-direct the section from the left-hand side back into her shoulder blade area. Now, if I were working my line square into the front and I was coming into the left-hand side to cut this section of hair from the side of her base, anybody know what I have to do with her body position? Can anyone tell me what is really important that we do with the body position of the guest? Anyone know? You're all on mute, by the way, so if you are trying to say and I can't hear you, think something.
Make sure the legs aren't crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure the legs aren't crossed. Why is that?
Because then it like makes it all a bit uneven, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So generally people will start to slant if their legs aren't uncrossed. Yeah, nice. What else do I have to do with her? Anybody tell me? There's one thing I'm really looking for, but I didn't think about the legs crossed, to be fair. That's a really good one, Grace. So you caught me out there. Anything else that I have to do?
Make sure her head's down.
So so the head's down now.
Yeah.
If we come into the side, we want to lift the head up. Okay.
Oh yeah. When you do the back, you want the head down, and the sides, you want to put it up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the difference is if I'm in the back and I'm cutting everything in the back, I can keep control of the head forwards. That's not an issue. With her head down, that's fine. I'm utilizing her body to help me keep away any graduation. But what would happen if I came through from the back and then came into the sides and wanted my length to be completely square? By the way, we all know, I'm not discussing why, but if we pull the hair back, we're keeping that slightly longer in the front, so it's a triangular line. We all are aware of why we do that. But say if we come and stand in the side and keep that line dead square and her head still forwards, what's going to happen when she walks home or walks out the door is she'll lift her head and that hair's going to lift up into the front. Okay. So if anybody's seen where they do a bob and they've got the head forwards and their bob is bang square and it looks beautiful, and then you'll lift their head up and it will go like that into the front and it lifts up and you've got all this heaviness in the base. That's why it happens. Okay. So when somebody's walking down the road, they don't walk down the road like this. Everyone walks down the road like this. So lift the head to where it is normally. So if I'm coming into the sides, lift our head, 90-degree angle between the chin and the chest, and then you will guarantee your balance on both sides. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But because we're cutting in the back, I can keep her head forwards and I'm minimizing my outline graduation. Okay, and as Grace says, we want to make sure that we have our legs uncrossed, and in the back, always keep the head pushed forwards. Okay. And I'm over directing back into my shoulder blade area just to ensure that my left hand side is the same balance as my right hand side. Okay, I'm going to do this last section because we've been on the one length for quite a while now. And my mannequin's got a bit of forward graduation in there. So that's quite a nice little thing to say, is that if there is some shaping in the front that you guys are aware of, but it doesn't reach where you're cutting, don't let it fool you or don't let it throw you off your game. just leave it out and we'll cut it later. Okay, so if it doesn't reach to where you want it to go, then don't start cutting it, as you all know. So if we spin round, we can see that balance is pretty good. So what we're going to do now is run through our overall layering technique. Okay, so we need to assess ourselves and assess that we've got what layers we've got in the hair, and assess where we're actually going to be looking to go with our guest. So as I say, I've got a square layer in here. Okay, I've got a square layer sitting somewhere with my layers around about here. She don't want to go too much shorter. With a uniform layer, she's going to go really quite short, and all of this is going to be very choppy and very it's a nice way to put it. It's going to be very soft, and she's going to go out with some really uneven layering. Okay, but we can't just put a square layer in there, and we can't just take off about 6 inches of hair and expect that to be a pass. It doesn't matter if you go from here to here. If it's still one length, it's still one length. You've not changed your shape. Okay, so fundamentally what we're going to do now is work some layering with our shape work. So square, round, triangular, what can we do? What can we change? And it's all down to our over direction and our elevation. Okay, now these for me are absolute fundamentals. Those of you who were working with me in the last lockdown, we were focusing on elevation and over direction more than anything else. As far as I remember, I'm sure we would have done, because I like talking about them. But if we work our shape in the back, we then need to change our shape through the front. Okay, and I'm going to explain a nice, easy way to work it. So again, I'm going to section the front away from the back and work my elevation first, or my back sections first of all. So if I section away from the crown to the top of the ear, and just quickly put that section in. Now the reason I work from the crown is it's the most central point of the head, or the most central point of the head with hair on it. So if you poked a stick through the crown, it would come out of the chin. And then if you cut it in half, then you'd find that you have 2 even sides of hair. Okay, so I work from the crown because it separates my areas up nicely and nice and evenly, but also it gives me a nice basis and a nice balance to be able to actually work the shape through into the front and control those little areas behind the ear, which we spoke about before, which I'm going to explain in a lot more detail now. Okay, so if we see again, section's just over the ear, and I'm going to focus on this back piece of hair because there's so much density in here. There's double the amount of hair in here, as we say, than there is around the sides. So we can go quite nice and heavy with this layering if we want to. We can go nice and light with this layering. All we need to do when we're thinking of layering is think, our consultation, she said it's quite heavy, the hair. So what do? We lift the hair higher than it is before. So when you're finding out where, say for instance, I don't know, Chelsea's doing a model or doing a client that I cut last week in salon, she's come back to Chelsea because she's not happy with what I've done. Okay, Chelsea needs to find out what she's not happy with. So she'll say, oh, what do you not like about your hair? The guest will say, oh, it's a little bit too heavy. All Chelsea needs to do is find out where I elevated the hair to. So she'll take her vertical section, lift that up, and she can find that my layering is done at 90 degrees, or my layering is done a little bit higher. Wherever she finds that nice, clean, straight line, she's going to find where my layering is done. Okay. Now, because my haircut on this mannequin last time was a square layer or a long rad, my layering is up here. Okay, so you'll be able to see my square line is in there. Okay, but what that formulates is a corner running through the haircut. Okay, so what I mean by a corner is the one length is all pulled down to here. My square layer is all pulled up to here. So in here, there's going to be a big corner knocking around because the hair won't reach, most of the hair won't reach down, and most of this hair from the line won't reach up, if that makes sense. and my corner is right in there. I don't know if you can see that. So that is where the weight is hiding in my haircut. You see it against, yeah, perfect. So that's where my weight is hiding. And what that corner is this big band of weight just in here, okay? So what do we do to change shape? We've heard what the guest is looking for. We've heard what she's not very happy with, and we know how to fix it. So we just need to change our elevation, okay? And change the way our haircut works. So we need to get rid of this little corner. So Chelsea then is going to think, right, all I've got to do is find my corner and take that corner off. And she's going to be so happy you fixed her hair. She's going to stay with you forever. All right. So if we have a look at our consultation sheets, at our head sheets, we're going to do one. So the left-hand side on the back, I'm going to do my line. So I'm going to show my length and show what I did with my one length haircut. So my black section is my sections, and my green is where I am expecting the hair to fall, or my elevation. And I've got my red is showing my over direction. So I'm showing everything is popping down onto that one line, okay? On the left-hand side, that came into the back of here. So everything was running parallel into the front. And I wanted my line to be longer into the front piece. So I over-directed my sections back to here, if you remember, okay? So my head sheets might not make any sense to you. I do head sheets to ensure that I can look back and think, right, I remember what I did. I know full well there that I took parallel sections all the way up and I over-directed everything to the back, which elongated my length into the front. Okay, oh, gold. Hang on, I've dropped my water bottle. I'm right under the bed. So all shape work is over direction, pulling the hair away from the technique. So we've pulled the front to the back to increase the length into the front, okay? So what we're gonna do now with our layering is work vertical sections, okay? All the way into behind the ear. And if we do it on this side here, so vertical sections all the way into behind the ear, I'm going to find where my corner is, as we said. So my elevation is going to come up to around about there. And I'm going to show you what we do with our over direction. Okay. So section number 1. Hopefully this is making sense to everybody. If it's not, please do stop me and tell me to go back, because I do get a bit carried away and just start talking. So if it doesn't make much sense, please stop me, tell me to go back, and we can go through something else. With our layering, keep the head upright at all times. If you're layering somebody's hair and her head is forwards, you're going to be on 90 degrees of elevation for your heaviest form of layering. As soon as she lifts her head to walk down the road, you turn into graduation. Okay, so the elevation chart up here is the most important thing, I think, in hairdressing. When we think of our weight building or a weight distribution, we think as soon as we lift the hair off of 0 degrees, we start to take weight out of the hair. Now, graduation is 89 degrees and down. That is where your hair is still stacking on top of each other, and layering is 90 degrees and up. So as we said earlier with our Chelsea scenario, if she found that my haircut was a little bit too heavy, she's got to find where I lifted it to and just lift it higher. And that's going to take more weight out of the guest's hair, okay? As opposed to getting your thinning scissors out and starting hacking the hair to bits. It's a much more technical way, okay? And we're going to keep her head upright and start directly in the center of the back of the guest's head, because it's the roundest point of that section that we're working on. So remembering that the head is round, we need to start to combat that roundness of the head. And I'll explain how we like to do so. So if we see section number 1 directly in the center, my elevation is going to come up somewhere about here. Okay, so my long graduation was here. That's the lightest you can form. So I'm going to run my section in here where my corner is to connect my long graduation into the rest of my look, because I now want to just take out that slight corner. If I lower her down a little bit, and we get our nice tension. So comb from the very, very beginning and fingers in, run my shape high, find my outline drops away, but I find the shortest point where I want to connect my layers to, and we're just going to push this corner away. Okay? So your examiner is going to say, so why are you elevating to there? And all we're going to say is there's a corner in here. We want to keep our elevation a little bit higher than 90 degrees, and we're going to run that shape into the front area by keeping our same elevation. Perfect. She's going to say, oh God, we'll carry on. So there's section number 1. Now, section number 2, we want to start implementing our over direction. Okay. So when you're working with your uniform layer, you're going to come around your shape and you're going to come off of the base of the haircut, off of the base of the head. And the head is round, okay? Well, it's not round, but the head is round enough. So if you come round on your shape and you're letting your outline drop away when you're coming through here, by the time you get to this point here above the ear, you're not letting any outline drop away, because as we've mentioned before, the hairline comes up and around the ear. So all of this section from the top of the ear down will all be your outline when you're letting your hair drop away. But when we come in here, you lose your outline. So you lose all your sustenance and stability around the ear. That's where you create your holes. So what I want to do is start to push more hair and more weight into that point. And this is where our over direction comes in. So if we label these sections number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to over direct each section back to the previous section. So section 2, we're going to pull back into section 1. Section 3, we're going to pull to section 2. And section 4, we're going to pull back into section 3. And the reason for is the head comes round. So we want to create more length into there. As opposed to coming round with the head, we want to pull the hair away from that section so that our layers come from quite nice and soft and come longer into here and keep that stability around the ear. Hopefully that makes sense, and it will do a little bit, but my elevation stays the same. So my layers stay the same, but they gradually get longer as we come into this section into behind the ear, just to control our overall outline. So as a restyle or a change of shape goes, we've gone from a square layer to we're now going into a triangular formation of layers, okay? Or a square layer really in the back, if you really break it down. I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to confuse you guys, but we're going to square layer the back because we're still creating that squareness. But it's the same if you think of the top of the head when you're working on your square layer. So if this is the top of the person's head and everything's coming up to here, can you see that? Hopefully there's a glare, isn't there? The central section in here, or in the top of the head, is a shorter distance, isn't it? So this section here and this section here. Yeah. So as the head's coming round, that's the front of the person's head. The head's coming round, there's a shorter distance from the center to there is to the two side pieces. And it's exactly the same situation when we come to the back of the head or the side of the head. So imagine this is now the back of the person's head, and there's the ears and there's the neckline. It's the same situation. Oh no, that's the top of the head, sorry. And there's the nose, for instance, and the two ears and the top. It's still the same situation. So you've still got your shortest point from the roundest bit. As we come into here, we need to control that length. So the way we control that length is by over directing to the previous section, because the hair is it's traveling further than it needs to sit into that point. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please do come on and let me know, but I'm going to show you now. So section 2, section 1, section 3, section 4. Section 2 comes back into section 1, and my elevation will stay the same. So I'm going to allow my outline to drop away in here, because that's my length. That's not going to reach the layers that I'm working on. My elevation is going to stay the same, but my sections now come back into the previous. So section 2 is back into section 1. If section 2 was on its own, it would be out here. Yeah, so I'm pulling it away, so it's traveling further than it needs to go because I'm working on a round surface and I want my line to be square. Okay, so again, into here and take that length. And then we're going to go to section 3 in behind the ear, if you can see that section. Get rid of section number 1 because we've done that now. We don't need to go into there. And section 3 will come back into section number 2. Keep my head out of the way. Okay, so same elevation all the way through. But if section 3 were coming out off the base, well, like our uniform layer does, we'd be out here now, yeah? But I want to come back into section number 2 because I want to ensure that I keep a little bit more weight just in behind the ear. So outline drops away and I'm back into section 2. And then section 4, we can pull back into section number 3 and we should hopefully run out of hair here. Yeah, good. So when I cross check, I'm going to bring section 1 back in. And when I cross check, I want to go against my shape. So I've worked vertically, so I'm going to cross check horizontally, but elevate my section to where I cut the hair to. Okay, so very important that we lift the hair to where we lifted it when we were elevating our layering first. So horizontal, and get my arm out of the way, and we find that we've got that nice clean square line. I don't know if you can see that. And then what we do when we assess where the layering falls is we can see now that my layers come from short in the back and they start to come longer and control that length down here. This is where my biggest danger zone for this haircut. I must control that area because otherwise you're going to find your line comes in and then this hair starts to sit up here and you get a big hole. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that. So with that side in, we now come to the left-hand side, okay? So your examiner's now coming over and saying, so what's that actually done? So you can say, we've worked our layering elevation up to here. I don't ever give degrees really. And we've over-directed our sections to back to the previous to ensure that we create a nice, clean, solid line into the base behind the right-hand ear and ensure that my layering is all connected with a square layer, okay? Perfect. She's going to say, bloody hell, you keep going. So now we come into the left-hand side. So we go back to the center, section number 1. That's probably too far over. Find section number 1 and push that side away and pick up section number 2. Okay. So section number 2 on this side, so it's 1's in the center, 2, 3, 4. We push back into 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3. Okay. Now you can come and stay on this side if you prefer to pull. I personally push and pull. So I pull away and push away. Pull towards me, push away. I find it easier, but this side do push enough because it is a little bit more difficult. But the head of the guest is still up and we're going to push this hair back into section number 1. So section 2, back into section 1. Really nice little tool as if you've got a mirror. Luckily, I've got the screen, so that's my mirror. But if you're looking in your mirror, so you look in that mirror, make sure that you're over directing away enough. Elevation stays the same. And we're going to cut this piece. And then we're going to go section number 3. Section 3 will go back into section number 2. And section 4 goes to section 3. Okay. So if somebody was working with, or if you were working with somebody who has very, very fine hair around their ears, or their hair's quite thick and then it gets very fine, you can over direct everything to the first section. So you can go 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, and that just extends that bit of weight and pushes the weight down behind the ear. Okay, because the mannequin's got sort of even density hair the whole way through, really, we're going to go back to the previous section. So 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3. And cross check, and it's square. Okay. If there's any questions on that, please do come in. But if we have a little look, the layers sit quite nicely, and we've got that, still got that weight pushed in here behind the ears, but we've got all of that softness running through with our layers. Okay. So now we come into the sides. Now this is where it gets quite, I think, interesting, but you may find tricky. And if you found that last bit tricky, I do apologise. But we're now working with our side parting, and we still need to think of our shape. We still need to think of what our shape is doing. So we've done square layering in the back, and now we're going to go to triangular layering. So as you see here, square is where you pull the hair into a certain point of the head and it's square. Round shapes are where you over direct to the front and it builds length into the back. And triangular shapes are where you take the hair from front to back and it increases that length. So what do we want to do? We want to ensure that our forward graduation in the front, we've got enough weight in there to do some forward graduation. So I want to pull this hair from the front to the back, and everything is going to increase that length. So where we've been increasing our length gently round the back, we now want to increase that length again and keep that flow going. Because if we remember with our one length haircut as well, everything was pulled from the front to the back. Okay, so I don't want my layering to go from my length to go from front to back, and my layers to just come around like a uniform layer, because the length is going to be short to long and the layers are going to come dead square. So I want to continue that form of shape. So there again is another change of shape. Okay, so where we've gone from it just being square, we can now go to the hair being square layering into triangular layering, and then into a bit of shaping around the front. Okay, so where we're going to go with this is primarily the same. Slightly diagonal sections facing forwards, and our elevation is going to, oh gosh, where's that gone? There it is. Our elevation is going to come back into here. So we're gradually increasing those layers as we go forwards, and our over direction will pull each of these sections into there. Make sense? So that then what we've got, our overall length sits shorter to longer in the base, and our layering, I don't know if you can see this, hopefully you can, our layering comes from shorter in the back and comes longer into behind the ears to control that area, and then runs into that front piece. Okay, so our layers get nice and choppy, but also run into any danger zones that we can't control. All right, so if you think about where the layer is actually falling, your guest is still going to be pretty happy because the hair's not going too short, the layers aren't going too short, but we're just controlling the way the hair works. Now the difference being with the side parting is really where I wanted to focus on for now. So we'll comb all the hair through, and we need to imagine where the hair is falling. And as we were speaking about earlier, how much further the hair has to travel to hit that same point if we've got a side parting. So as you see, it's quite far over really from the center. So we want to make sure that this hair here is long enough to fall and hit the same level of this layering. So if I pull everything back square, you're going to find that this side comes shorter and this side comes longer because the hair's got further to go. Okay, so let's deal with that. I'm going to start with the heavy side because this is a little bit easier to do. So I'm going to spray all this through and just work my shape in normally. So my next section is going to be slightly diagonal into the front, and this is my heavier side. So I want my elevation to be on the point of elevation from the back. So, oh gosh. So I take a little section in the base or in my back section, keep it nice and clean, and then run our shape in. So my elevation is going to stay the same. I'm going to stand in the back of the guest now, okay, and elevate high, find my guideline, and take that away. Okay, so because we're over directing from front to back, we're changing the shape to go from square to triangular. So if she asks you, why are you doing that? Say the triangular layer is going to connect my square into triangular and continue the flow of shorter to longer layers into the front. Also, it's going to help me build some more weight around the hairline, which is a lower density, so that when I do my forward graduation, we've got a lot more stability in the look. Perfect. She's going to give you a distinction for that answer alone. So distinction is what we're going for. And if you're talking about shape and you're explaining things through, you're going to know more than what she knows or the examiner knows, I would say. So next section forwards, and we're coming back into our shape. So again, elevation stays the same, and we find our guideline and run that line. And again, standing in the back, elevation stays the same. Everything's been elevated to the same point, hasn't it? So we've located where we need to elevate, and everything from the back has all come into here. That's all where we're going, on the back and the left. Okay. And when we run this final section from the front back, chances are it won't reach because I've got forward graduation in there. There'll be a little bit of hair. So again, elevate high, and there's a tiny piece to take away. And last little bit in there, elevation stays the same, and we run. So if we see where she falls on this side, you will find that, wait for the colour to change, there we go. So you'll find that our layers all sit quite nicely. That's quite good. But I'm going to make my mistake here on this left side and show you what I mean by the way the hair falls. So if we were to just pull this back to the same position, because there's a smaller side, there's less hair to cut or less length for the hair to travel. If I do the same on this side, I'll show you what I mean and then show you the correction. So we're going to lift this back into here. Elevation stays in the same. I'm going to take that section and then take my next section into here and pull back. And then I'm really running out of hair already. I've hardly got anything left to cut. So you can see the difference already with the amount we're cutting off, the length of hair or the additional length. So if I comb that through, mess it up and show you. So we can see my shortest layer in here falls in there, okay? And my shortest layer on this side here falls in there, okay? So even though they're balanced, because I've pulled them to the same point, they're balanced in terms of technical balance, but they're not balanced when the hair is flat, yeah? So she's got longer layers this side than she does on this side. So how do we counteract that? It's a very, very easy way, and I will show you it now. So we want to ensure that on the lighter side, we elevate higher, okay? So we want our elevation, on the heavy side, our elevation was here, the same as the whole way through the cut. But now, on this side, we want the elevation to be slightly higher because we want to take more weight off this right-hand side. So as we know, back to our elevation chart, if you want to take more weight off, then we just elevate that section slightly higher. I've got a sneeze that I need to, sorry, I need to sneeze, but it's not coming. We need to keep our elevation slightly higher. So how do we check that as a cross-check though? And a really nice little technique for knowing that is the distance between the parting and the center of the head or the center of the face. So there's the center of her face. I'm going to pull it in so you can really see. There's the center of her. Straighten her up, wait for the light to go. Perfect. There's the center of her face. That's not going to work. There we go. There's the center of her face. There's the parting, and there's about an inch or so of a gap between. Okay. We want, when we pull everything up square, completely over, we want there to be a step of about an inch. We want the same area of section between the nose and the parting to be that step up here when we lift everything through. Okay, and that will make sure you are completely balanced. And I will show you now what I mean. So left hand side, we go back into our piece in the rear and take our section from our crown, because this is where the section would have begun. Take our next section in here, and I want to then take my little piece from the back as usual, because I still want to flow off my guideline. So I still want the hair to connect, okay? We're still working triangularly because we're still pulling from front to back. So we've gone from square to triangle on both sides. So there's our change in shape. But my elevation is now going to change. And you need to explain, if you do this, you must explain this is what you're doing to your examiner, because this is going to be something that she's not going to know what you're talking about until you show her. So our section here, our elevation before was here. We now want it here. Okay, so a little bit higher. And it is a trial and error sort of thing, but once you get the hang of it, you'll get the hang of it. So there's our guide, and run the shape. Next section forwards, we're pulling back to the same point because our elevation was higher, so we need a higher point. And I'm coming down shorter. And then this last little piece here, stand on my stand, pull up and find our piece. So then if I spin her, you'll be able to see what I mean. So I'm looking for a step of about 1 inch, okay? When we come across the parting with our cross check. And 1 second. And we can see we get that slight step. It's not a big enough step for what I'm looking for, but we still create that step. So I'm going to go in again, okay? And always work this section down. There hasn't got to be done in the very, very first go. It is quite a difficult thing to get yourself set for, but we're going to go again, okay? So take our shape and step it, and then the elevation just comes a little bit higher each time as we go through. And then last little piece over here, elevation's just that little bit higher to create my nice stability. And then when we check our length, if I show you now, check across the whole part, and we get that. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see. You get that shorter to longer piece. So we've got that shorter step into the top. So then when we have a look at where our layers fall, put it back in the right parting, that will help, wouldn't it? We can find that our layers sit balanced on both sides. Hopefully sit balanced on both sides of the head. We give her a bit of a bounce. So we can find our shorter layer sits just in here, and our shorter layer this side sits just in there. Okay, and then we can come through and do a bit of forward graduation if we want to, which we do. So I'm going to run a bit of forward graduation in here now. So everybody who's seen my little way of doing forward graduation, then we're going to do that again, basically. So I'm going to do one little section because I don't want to go too crazy on this mannequin. Oh God, where's she going? Here she comes. So we're going to take a very fine section around the front hairline. And some people do this visually. It's not wrong if you do it visually. Some people comb it into place and just cut it. That's not wrong either. It's really not an issue if you find your own way to work this forward graduation. Okay. It's just my way that I work it, I find is the easiest way to keep your balance. The visual way is that I just find it a little bit difficult to do myself, if I'm completely honest. I just can't get the right balance, so I don't bother. I do it more technically. So we're going to run our shape, and remembering that we've got this little side parting to think of, okay? So then again, the same situation happens, the same scenario happens. We want to keep that slight elevation quite low on this side. So I'm going to run my line. I'm going to take my first little piece into the width of the nose again. And remembering now that we're coming heavier on this left-hand side. So I want my shape to already be angled into the nose, and then come and connect this piece to the angle of the nose as well. And then the same situation comes in. We angle to the top of the chin and point that shape. And then we run that length in, and we can see that forward graduation just forms and just builds in the front. Now this left-hand side or the right-hand side of her, we come back in, and I'm just going to go a little bit shorter with it. Okay. And run that line. My fingertips are still pointing into the same position. So if you use your facial features as your example, the nose, the corners of the lips, the chin, the cheekbones, anything bangs the area, come to about the lip area. Anything longer, you want to leave a little bit longer, but utilize the symmetry on the face, and you will always, always keep a nice clean balance to your overall look. Okay. And then we dress that across and just see how that sits. If we're going any further back, we're going to elevate each section a little bit higher each time, just to ensure that the weight is being pushed back off the face. Okay, so what around a facial features or a shaping around the front is, it's actually a round layer or a round graduation. So technically, if you're using your line or your one length for your shape for your 3 inches, and then you're using your square layers into your triangular layers, but your elevations change to ensure that your layers stay balanced on your person. And then you start coming through the front, where you have your first section here, second section elevates, third section elevates, and you're coming back with diagonal sections. You're going from square into triangular layers into round layers from the front. So 3 forms of shape change, and 3 inches come off. And there is a nice easy restyle for somebody that still wants to keep length, still wants to keep a non-very heavily layered haircut, but something that still has a lot of technique to it, and an awful lot of you showing what you know, and you showing what techniques you're aware of, and what techniques you can do to control your guest's hair. All the while, you're explaining things through to your guest, you're explaining what you're doing, you're explaining so that your examiner can hear you. Now you're going to blow dry, so you get your products out and you shout across the room that you are using this shampoo or you're using this heat defense to defend the guest's hair from heat. So she hears. Make sure she hears everything, all right? I'm not going to blow dry because I know you can all blow dry hair pretty well. So for your session, have a go at your haircuts, have a go at doing this haircut. I'm going to email all of you guys what I was talking a little bit about earlier with Grace. I'm going to email you through the EPA preparation documents that we've got, and email you through an example of your day plan. I'd like you to have a little go at that, have a little plan and see what you actually want to do. I'll also send you the video that I did with another group of mine, explaining what you need to do in your EPA and how to do it and how to break your day down. And yeah, and I'll also send you a laugh through. So thank you for joining. Aisha, do you want to add anything? She's still there, I think. Do you want to add something, or are we good to go? You're on mute. She's still on mute. Shall I unmute her? Unmute yourself. I'm going to stop recording, by the way, as well. That's a good point.